Welcome everyone to the November 12th City Council work session. Welcome to everyone here and at home. And we have two items for our work session today. The first up is the Judicial Evaluation Committee report.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. My name is Alana Holmes. I'm the Human Resources Director here at the City of Eugene. This work session is for Council to review, discuss, and accept the report that has been submitted by the 2014 Judicial Evaluation Committee as part of the formal evaluation of a municipal court presiding Judge Allen. Code 2.011 requires a formal citizen review of the municipal court presiding judge during the last year of his four-year term. On July 28th of this year, the Council appointed the following individuals as members of the 2014 Judicial Evaluation Committee to conduct the formal evaluation. Ken Newbuck from the Human Rights Commission, Joe Connolly, a defense attorney, John Kilcullen, local attorney and former municipal court judge, who's here with us, Eric Richardson, Lane County NAACP president, Francesca Leva Johnson, a former coordinator for the Court Paso a Paso program, as well as Kathy Cunningham, the Springfield Municipal Court administrator. I would just like to take a minute to thank each of the committee members for their hard work and dedication to this process. They gave up several evenings to work together the past few months in order to accomplish the report and information that you have before you today. This has been greatly appreciated by staff. So again, as I've mentioned, we have two committee members that are here today to present the highlights of the report, as well as answer questions you might have about the process that was utilized or the report itself. So at this point, I'll turn it over to John Kilcullen and Eric Richardson.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, and good afternoon. It was my privilege, actually, to serve on this Judicial Evaluation Committee. As you know from the people who were appointed, they come from a variety of backgrounds, and I thought that we worked together really quite well, and I really appreciated the collegiality with which we were all able to work. And I thought that we provided a better product because of that variety that we had. I'd also like to acknowledge the guidance and assistance that we got from city staff. Alana Holmes, Christy Hammett, and Misty Jarrett were invaluable in our work. We could not have done it without them in all candor. Mr. Richardson and I are here to, on behalf of the committee, to provide an overview of what we learned about the Eugene Municipal Court and how we did the 2014 Judicial Evaluation report. We'll go into some of the highlights, and they'll be available for questions if any of the members of the council have any at the end of what we're going to talk about. And I'd like to start with just a brief overview of the municipal court. As you're aware, the Eugene Municipal Court has jurisdiction to hear a variety of charges, misdemeanors, code violations, major traffic, minor traffic, and it has exclusive jurisdiction over the parking tickets. Municipal court judges have a variety of authorities that are granted to them by the code and by statute. That includes the authority to adjudicate cases, to impose fines and other sanctions, to issue warrants for the arrest of individuals, to summon jurors, to conduct and preside over jury trials and non-jury trials, and to perform other judicial functions. And in charge of all of that is Judge Wayne Allen, who's been in that position for at least 20 years, as I recall, and I think he was an associate judge or an assistant judge before that. As far back as I go, which was back into the 70s, when I remember him being there when I was on the sheriff's office. In any event, the committee was informed that the court, the Eugene Municipal Court, does much more, I should add, than simply impose fines and incarcerate individuals who have offended. There's been a great effort on their part to come up with alternatives in dealing with people. The court, Judge Allen, made it clear that consequences are important, but those consequences need to be tempered with the type of offense, the individual that's involved, their circumstances, and then what is in the best interest of the community. And we were told about a number of programs that have been developed at the Eugene Municipal Court that attempt to impose some consequence, but at the same time take into consideration all of these other factors. Eugene has the benefit of having a wide variety of folks from all levels of both socioeconomic background as well as ethnic, religious, sexual orientation, all kinds of backgrounds. And so all of those things were taken into consideration when these programs, we're told, were adopted. One, of course, is Paso a Paso, which has been around for quite a while, and it's aimed to provide some assistance to people for people who do not have English as their primary language. It helps them when they're appearing in court. It helps them with understanding what the process is, and it's been, I'm told, very, very helpful in helping people who do not speak very good, if any, English. Another program we were told about was the Downtown Cleanup Team, which seems like a good idea. It's an alternative to a sentence for a variety of or a way to resolve some fines that people may have. It's set for 3 hours in the mornings, and people get to spend that time working at downtown. And one of the benefits of that cleanup program is that people who are put into it, rather than the normal $10 per hour that they get for working off a fine, they get $20. So there's an added $20 credit. So there's an added benefit there. The Violations Bureau has been around for quite a while. That's an opportunity for people who have been issued a traffic citation to go in and talk to a clerk rather than appear before a judge. There's a set fine depending upon the number of offenses that the person has been convicted of, and that's taken into consideration. They pay the fine, and then they can go on with their business. Something called restorative justice has been established. It looks like it's aimed really only at this time to the unruly gathering ordinance, but it's an opportunity for them to have some alternative to a conviction and a substantial fine. There's deferred prosecution program, which I understand applies to a variety of offenses. It's kind of a diversion program where a person will either admit, plead guilty, or plead no contest. Then if they comply with the terms of the diversion, such as not get into any trouble, not break any laws for a period of 6 months, and they usually have to pay something to the court, then the charges are eventually dismissed. The Vehicle Compliance Program, which I should add, Judge Allen indicated that he wishes to expand, but this is a program where somebody who has particularly a licensing or an equipment violation that they get a citation for, it's a fix-it ticket, basically, and just requires the cooperation of them to get it taken care of in a timely manner, and then bring in proof that they have accomplished that. The Bicycle Diversion Program has been, I think, successful for people who are cited while riding bicycles for a variety of reasons. I think it's pretty good program. But anyway, they will not impose a fine, but they'll be able to they'll plead guilty, and then they'll go to a diversion program for some education. The Teen Driver Program, which I think is very good as well. If you're 15 to 17, you get a traffic citation. You can go to the Teen Driver Program. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting about it is the cost of that Teen Driver Program depended upon whether the parent of the teen accompanied the teen to the program. If they went alone, it was $70, and if they took a parent, it was $40. So there was some incentive. So I thought that was, and I think the whole committee thought that was very good. And then, of course, we learned about the Mental Health Court, which is kind of I think that's Judge Maury's baby, so to speak, and she works real hard in that one. Another thing, of course, that the council is aware is that a substantial amount of time and expense for the court is devoted to repeat offenders. They take up a lot of time in the courtroom itself, a lot of judge time, and of course they take up jail beds. A lot of these people, if not the vast majority, suffer from a variety of problems, some of which are not always their fault. Things like substance abuse, alcohol or drugs, mental disorders that have not been treated, and of course some of them are there because of abject poverty, and they just take up a lot of the court's time. And I am now informed that the council has looked at this and is familiar with the community court issue, and this is something that the committee thinks is a good idea and would like to see continued. It would be a way to use the court to get people into the services that they need, and the committee would like to see that encouraged and followed through on and fully endorsed. I understand that there are limitations on the resources available in the community, but that's something that needs to be worked on. Judge Allen did point out that he has been working with the veterans, some veterans organizations, and trying to use this community court project as a framework for getting veterans into the assistance that they need. As part of our evaluation process, of course, we reviewed the past data from the 2010 evaluation, and we conducted our own survey, and Mr. Richardson will explain that.
Okay, thanks, John. I just wanted to support what John was saying about our support of the diversion programs that they have set up, and the idea that the court and the city can support people who need that extra help. We recognize that there's a lot of poverty, and with poverty there comes this homeless issue as well, so we didn't mention that. But so basically, I'm very novice at this process, and I want to thank you all thank you, Mayor, for allowing me to serve on this committee. I think this is a valuable service in itself, in that I could share my experience and whatever I learned on the committee with my constituents and the folks I work with. And so this process began in September with the appointment of this evaluation committee. And basically, when we first got together, we were given an overview of the court system, somewhat like John has just stated. And this was an education for me, and I think it was a way of understanding better the processes and the jurisdiction of the court for me. We were given plenty of information about the court and its operation. Some of the things that we were given was a tour of the new courthouse, and we talked about the benefits of the new courthouse and having more space and a more receptive area for the community to feel comfortable coming to the courthouse. I think this whole idea of having the survey is a positive thing. And we talked also early on about surveys that are given to defendants at the court. And one of the things that we talked about that I thought was maybe could be useful was to collect demographic information on those surveys from the defendants, because I felt like if we were to do so, we would get more pointed information from our constituents about their interaction with the court that we might not get with a blank survey. So, and of course, there's reasons why we might not want to do that as well. But I think that was received well by the committee, and I think the judge as well thought that would be useful information. So The tour, I thought we also talked about at the tour, we talked about some other things, just as decor and how we can make the place more welcoming. And there are different issues that came up in that tour that I think that aren't privy to this, but that are on the radar as far as the interaction between the community and the court. And so, and I guess this survey is also an idea of what does the community know, how much does the community know about the court and the workings of the court. And so what we did was we had a group of community members who are affiliated with the court or have some kind of interaction with the court, and they, such as the Eugene Police Department, members of the Eugene Police Department and others. So these are the people that we reached out to with our survey. And we also thought that it would be important to have community organizations that work with populations that interact with the court, and therefore I think we chose Centro Latino Americano as that organization to survey as well. And so these entities in the community are all have interactions with the court, such as defense attorneys, Lane County Adult Corrections and Springfield Jail, parking control officers, and so and there's others on this list, as you can see in the report. 360 surveys were actually sent out with a 16% return rate, which is actually only 59 return, which is about average with the years gone by. And with this survey, how we compiled the actual questions was we decided to conform with past surveys and really keep it going as far as what was I asked you earlier. So consistency of the questions in the survey, excuse me, and so we looked at past surveys and we looked at the questions and we asked the committee to just review those questions, see if we wanted to add any. And for the most part, there were no additions, but we did decide to break questions apart that we felt were compound questions that hid maybe some information that was in there. And for me, one of the ones, it was just, and it's a kind of a telling thing, is that all the equity, fairness, and integrity questions were kind of under one big question. And we just kind of split that into 3 questions, and that goes back to the demographic ideas that we kind of want to find more pointed information if we can. And that goes to the diversion programs, how useful are they, who will access them, and that type of thing. And so that was, I think, very useful to get that information. And so the feedback that we got was basically generally good. One of the points that I noticed that I think we could focus better on as far as our survey is that there was a lot of the questions that were respondents were just saying they didn't have enough information or knowledge to answer the question. So maybe that's part of our targeting of the surveys. Maybe more cost involved or more time involved, more targeted surveying. But I think that would be useful as well to maybe create surveys for specific interactions that occur. But overall, like I said, I think we had you could go through yourselves and look at the numbers, but for the most part, they're positive numbers for the judge. And we went on, the third part of our process was to actually have an interview session with Judge Allen. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to John to just begin the discussion about what we talked about and some of the findings that we got out of that conversation.
Well, obviously, meeting with him was an important thing for us to do. We discussed the survey results and asked questions about any changes or improvements that had occurred since 2010. We discussed some more recent issues that the committee thought about, and then future challenges for the court. Among the things that we talked, Eric already had mentioned it, is the move to the Brown building. It had a lot of good things. I think it's more accessible. There's better parking, and it's not not so tied to the limited parking here downtown. Has a larger space for jurors, and there's a third courtroom. It's just set up so it's larger, and it feels a little bit more inviting. Now, I will tell you that the committee had mixed feelings about how inviting you want the court to be. But in general, we thought that it was set up very well. There was some discussion with Judge Allen about problems created by the most recent computer program. I don't know how much that's been made aware to the council, but it sounds like there's still a lot of bugs that are being worked out, and hopefully that will happen very soon. We talked about some limitations that the Judge Allen thought the court had, and one of those was available jail beds, which is probably a constant topic. There are some people who don't need to go to jail, but there are other people that's the only thing that gets their attention, and it's also for some of them the only time they have to get a warm bed and meal. But anyway, there was some talk about more jail beds and appreciation for the council agreeing to contract for 10 beds over at the Springfield City Jail. Although there were comments from a couple of people, Judge Allen, I think, mentioned it, and Joe Conley, who's a criminal defense lawyer and on the indigent defense panel for the city of Eugene. And their comments were that inmates would prefer not to go over to Springfield if they had a choice, that it's a little more stark, that they would prefer, if they're going to have to be incarcerated, leave me in the Lane County Jail, but please don't send me to Springfield, which I thought might have some deterrent effect. An ongoing issue that existed in the 2010 evaluation, which carried over into the answers in the 2014 survey that we did, had to do with the oversight and supervision of associate and assistant judges. There were comments by a number of the people. In fact, if you look at the results, there are more negative, disagree and strongly disagree comments or answers to those type of questions than to anything else. Not surprisingly, there is at least one person who disagreed or strongly disagreed with everything having to do with Judge Allen, but I throw out 2 out of 59. But with these others, they were a little bit more. So we talked to Judge Allen about that, and it's something that he's aware of. He told us that he's working on, but it is not an easy process. All of the judges are part-time, and so they, for the most part, have other legal jobs that they are participating in, and not all of it is criminal defense. But he agreed that it is important for judges to be consistent in similar circumstances. There's something to be said, and as a lawyer, I can assure you that there's something important about being able to predict what's going to happen when you go to court. There's always exceptions, but you like to have an idea about what the judge is going to do. And Judge Allen pointed out that he agrees with that and is working on it. He has regular meetings, at least monthly, with his judges. He encourages them to interact and consult with each other over issues. There are some easy questions that you have about, I remember when I was there, an easy question was, when you're wearing a seatbelt, does it matter if it's under your arm or over your shoulder? It does. But there are other questions that were very difficult. And the one judge dealing with the homeless issues that has been an issue for the city. I mean, those were hard decisions. And he is working very hard to keep, I believe, and the committee believes, to see that things happen with some uniformity and that there was some predictability. A top priority the judge told us about was getting rid of a backlog of the cases. He'd like there to be a turnaround of 2 weeks between when a person appears initially and when there's some resolution of the case. That's particularly true for those people who get incarcerated. They appear for their jail arraignment, they get released, and then they forget or that they shine it on. But the closer it is in time, the more likely it is for them to remember something 2 weeks out rather than 2 months out. So he talked about how he's going to be working with the stakeholders, in particular the city prosecutor, about what do we do about older cases and getting things moved up. He has a good relationship, I know, with the city prosecutors as well as the criminal defense lawyers, both ones that are contracted with the city as well as ones who would come in otherwise. He is concerned about old cases, expressed concern about old cases and what's going to happen with those. We go back, a case that's 2 or 3 years old, and it's a trespassing, and the person hasn't been heard. Why do we keep it on the books? That sort of thing. So he is aware of and conscious of those and will be working on those. A problem he recognized in getting that done is the lack of full-time prosecutor, of enough prosecutor time in order to deal with all of these cases. That would be a very helpful thing that he told us about. Like I said, he expressed interest in working more closely with stakeholders, prosecutors, defense bar, as well as the police. And of course, the city municipal court has taken on both City of Eugene and University of Oregon. That's where they get cited for violations into the Eugene Municipal Court. He did show strong support and enthusiasm for the community court. It was evident to all of us that Judge Allen cared for the court very much, that he was open to any suggestion and that would make it more effective and efficient and more not inviting, but just capable of handling everything that comes before it. You already know that do you have anything you wanted to add about what we talked to with Judge Allen?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to give my impression of Judge Allen. I thought Judge Allen was very open to ideas about working with the community and working with people who are having difficulties interacting with the court. And one of the issues that I brought up was that there are communities such as the Latino community and immigrant community that has a hard time interacting with the court due to language, but also there's cultural issues in the African American community about interacting with the court, and I think there's still assistance and advocacy that's needed on that level, and the judge also agreed that could be helpful for some folks who do have that discomfort when interacting with the court. And so the idea of advocacy is, I think, is well supported. And also, I just wanted the idea of expediting the court docket so that we can have people's courts heard quickly. A 2-month time period is kind of difficult, especially when you're dealing with traffic issues and whatnot, and people not being able to access transportation and so it could really dig into what happens and get them into a rut. So the sooner we can deal with their issues, the better, I think. But overall, I really look up to our judges and think they're very important. I think we talked about the idea of educating the community about the role of the judges and how what part they play in our system as advocates also for the community, and not just people who are putting people away, so to speak. So I think we need to do maybe a better job, or give more resources towards educating about the court and whatnot. So.
And along those same lines, I'd just like to point out that Judge Allen talked about the importance of the court to the community, and he expressed his willingness that if he got invited to various community organizations, he would be happy to attend those meetings, which I thought was very open and encouraging of him. Well, as you know, the committee recommends that Judge Allen be reappointed for another 4-year term, but we don't just recommend it. To demonstrate our feeling about what you should do comes from a change that was in the original draft of the report. Rather than say that the committee unanimously recommends reappointment, the language was changed to that the committee unanimously and enthusiastically supports the appointment of Judge Allen. And on a personal note, let me just say that I've known Wayne Allen for in excess of 30 years. I've worked with him on civil cases and our private practices, and I had the privilege of working under him when I served for 15-plus years as a Eugene Municipal Court judge. And I can personally attest to his character, his competence, his openness, his judicial demeanor, and his overall fairness. Eugene's lucky to have him, and I hope that you reappoint him. Thank you.
So at this time, we'll certainly have an opportunity for questions from council to the committee members. I just wanted to remind you of some of the next steps. However, next Monday night is a public hearing for you to receive comment from the public. Next Wednesday, you will have an opportunity to meet at a noon work session with Judge Allen directly, ask questions of him before making a decision on a reappointment.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's great. I've got Mike and Claire and Greg, and I would start out by, I guess we'll get to say this again, Judge Allen, but I agree that we feel very fortunate to have you. I want to thank you all for your participation. This is probably the most thorough look that we've had in the time that I've been here, so I really appreciate the seriousness that you took with this responsibility. I think it is a very serious thing, and especially as we wrestle with a lot of vulnerable people in the community and a lot of people who are hitting up against our court system, that it becomes even more important. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate all the comments about respect for the offenders, and Eric, I want to tell you that I really appreciate you wanting to take the deeper dive and to really filter out more information that can be helpful, and I think everything you guys did is to try to improve and to allow us to move forward. So I really appreciate that. I have to say the change to the new court for me is a remarkable one, having walked what I used to call the gauntlet many times as you walked into the city manager's office and walked across there. All those people are having to do their court business standing, as you remember, outside. It's not the most ideal situation for anybody, and certainly not for anybody's privacy either. So I very much appreciate the new situation. I'm hoping that we will think about how we can have these conversations more often than when we're talking about how the judge is doing his job. That I think this is something that we need to sort of look at on a routine basis, how things are working in our court and what we can do to take that look on a more routine basis in a very sort of positive, how do we keep building a better court system, a more responsive one. And as much as I appreciate that the Springfield Jail is not an inviting place to some people, I always want to walk that balance between, yes, you don't want people to think jail is an easy place, but you also want it to be a just and fair place, and maintaining that balance is very important. Keeping the cases going seems really important, and I'd like to. I'd like to hear about it, how it's going more often as you try to improve that. And I like this idea very much of trying to educate people more in general, and we should work with you on how to create opportunities, because I just think being able for people to have a better understanding of all the things that are happening in the court, to try to give people options, can have a very profound effect on how people feel justice is being meted out. So I think that's super important. And so that's enough for me for right now. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. Eric, John, thank you very much to both of you and to all the members of the committee for all of your hard work and for this good report. Creating a more just community is work that's never finished, but work that I think is important to do, and you have played a big part of that, and I appreciate it very much. Fellow once said that justice delayed is justice denied. I'm truly concerned about that when I read about the length of time that some of the cases sit, that the backlog in the prosecutor's office. And I know this is something that has been discussed at our budget table before and probably will be again, and certainly the judge has made us aware of this on several occasions. I'm wondering, did the committee make any specific recommendations with regard to what might be an effective way to deal with that issue with regard to city resources as we come up to budget time? Should we be looking at an initiative to add more staff to our prosecutor's office in order to see that work not pile up so much?
Well, we didn't view our job as to make specific recommendations as opposed to just make observations. But I thought that Judge Allen was very insightful when he made his comments about it. And the problem, well, he commented about how he doesn't know how the current city prosecutor is getting as much done as she is able to.
Right.
And that she just needs more help. And that would seem to take care of it. Maybe some more coordination with the city prosecutor, or excuse me, the defense attorneys in the cases, more coordination over at the jail. For instance, Mr. Conley mentioned how there could be some immediate resolution of cases that where persons were arraigned at the jail, and there'd be an offer and a resolution right then. But then that changed, as I understood it, when the city decided to have some deputy DAs do the prosecuting, and I don't know the details of that, but as I understood it, that set of prosecutors wanted to be present whenever somebody was sentenced, and they weren't present over at the jail arraignments, and so therefore that system got dropped. And Joe Conley in particular thought that it may be helpful, and my impression was that Judge Allen thought that it would be worth exploring, a way to get cases resolved there at arraignment, especially those who are at the jail, and they're going to be there on a trespass or some sort of minor violation. The sentence is going to be the same in almost all of them, a day or two with credit for time served, or maybe some community service. Most of them are not able to pay much of a fine, if any, and that I think the committee thought would be helpful, and also save a lot of expenses as well as time.
Yeah, no, I agree with that because I had noted in our committee meeting that I had seen or been part of the process, and that understand that is something that does help the defendant and the court system to expedite that. And so having that system in the courthouse, I think, is something to look at.
Okay, I appreciate. Sorry, go ahead.
I think Christy might also have something to add.
Yeah, just a really short addition. One of the things that I wanted to make you all aware of is that there's a lot of work, and we talked about it.
You can hardly hear you.
Oh, sorry about that, Mayor. Thank you. I'm Christy Hammett, Central Services Director, and I was working with the committee, and in addition, I've been working on a lot of different strategies that are being evaluated right now to address the backlog. Judge Allen will have a chance to talk with you about that, but there's a lot of coordination between the prosecutor's office, the police department, and the court, and we've had some all-day meetings looking at how to work through the backlog, and so I think that we have some plans in motion that will help us figure out what strategies we'll be able to proceed with.
Well, I hear that, and I appreciate this suggestion that you made there with regard to the arraignment procedure and where it takes place. I also will look forward to the conversation with the judge, too. It strikes me, though, that the committee felt it as a significant enough issue to include it in here, and that's important to me. And with regard to what Christy was saying. I look forward to that conversation as well. I would think the worst outcome for us would be for us to police less as a way to decrease the impact on the prosecutor's office. So I'm hopeful that we address that by making sure we have appropriate resources to their department. Lastly, gentlemen, do you think that the current facility is the best facility? I know it's better, and that's fantastic. Do you think it wise for us to begin to plan, as we have discussed, perhaps for a consolidated or for a future consolidated city hall that would include the court or bundled court with the county at some point in the future, or do you see this facility as sufficient based on what you folks have analyzed?
Are you asking for my personal thought?
I'm asking you your own, and then to summarize too, kind of the discussions of the committee around the issue of the facilities. I mean, is this a good enough place? Do we need to look at something else?
No, I think the consensus of the committee was that it's a good facility and it serves its purpose. It has so many more benefits than the old system that the mayor was talking about. I remember,
Sure.
It was just a little central area that isn't much bigger than this table that everybody had to join in, and there was no place for the attorneys to meet with their clients except outside in the cold and rain.
That's right.
And with everybody else walking by. So I think that is an adequate facility. I'm not sure there's any benefit from it being consolidated into a single building with the rest of the city hall. I think there's a benefit of having it being separate. And as far as the facility itself, I travel all over the state appearing in courts, and that facility is nicer than most of the county courthouses. It does not compare to the federal courthouses, but the state courthouses, it's better than most.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Claire?
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, both of you and the rest of your committee members, for this great report, and I really appreciate the thoughtful process that you went through and looking to create a deeper survey of the system. And I think it's really valuable information to the community to kind of have it all in one place, vetted by a committee of volunteers. And some of what I want to say I'll probably repeat next week when we have Judge Allen at the table, but I just also wanted to express my gratitude to Judge Allen for his ongoing service to the community. I think we're really fortunate to have a judge who works with such integrity and caring and is so obviously a leader in his profession. And also, in spite of the challenges of reduced resources and the backlog of cases, I really see this department as a bright spot in our city, a place where we've got real accomplishment and innovation in the works, and in spite of kind of the tough times, we are getting the job done. It's not perfect, but I do see us getting the job done with real integrity and thoughtfulness. And so I did have a question. It wasn't clear to me in the report on the section about associate and assistant judges. How many individuals are we talking about?
Well, as I understand it, there's one assistant judge, and that would be Mary Morey. And my sense is there's four associate judges.
Okay. And was there any effort in your conversation as a committee or with Judge Allen to kind of quantify that issue around the consistency piece? How much disparity there is between how judges might view similar cases, and I'm assuming that's the consistency issue. It's not a single judge who's inconsistent in their rulings, but depending on which judge you're going before, you might not have the same consistency that Judge Allen would like to see.
Well, go ahead.
Well, from my understanding, I would say no, that would be something that we could look at deeper. I mean, we understood that there were disparities from testimony, but that was the depth of it.
So that's a question maybe for the next go around to look at that a little deeper.
Yes, I would think so. I mean, we did talk about, there is complete consistency in some of the charges. The traffic, I mean, there's a set procedure, and Judge Allen does have some recommended sentences for the whole variety of things. We did not talk about specific judges, didn't think that that was our role.
Okay, great. And then again, this is a comment I'll probably make again next week, but I think, given Judge Allen's expressed willingness to go out into the community and make presentations, I think we should find a way. I don't know if our public affairs staff could help get the word out to the Rotary clubs and the other groups out there that would welcome this kind of speaker. Neighborhood associations, obviously, but even beyond that, the other civic organizations. I think that'd be a great use of that department. Thank you.
Greg?
Thanks, Mayor. Again, I want to echo both Councilor Clark and Councilor Syrett's comments to the committee. John, you and Eric did a wonderful job along with the rest of your committee members. Very impressive report. Judge Allen, again, extreme professionalism and compassion. That's all I've heard over the last 20 years. I remember when you first got appointed, way back when, so I had hair then. But that's another story. And Judge Allen still has his, so that's a good thing. But I think my question is more for Alana than the two of you, or maybe anybody can answer this. In terms of the University of Oregon, I noted that their misdemeanors and other things come under our jurisdiction as the city. Are we involved in any contractual relationship with the university that they would be in a position to compensate us for acts that students make on the campus or in and around that would cause us to have some additional revenue, or are we doing this as part of the fact that the university is within the jurisdiction of the city, and then ergo whatever happens there also adds to our burden as a community?
That's a really good question. We do not have any contractual relationship with the University of Oregon to provide court services. And I just had a conversation recently with the police department about the level of activity, and also just in reviewing the municipal court activity to see what has been the impact of adding the U of O Public Safety Department. And what we're seeing is that there's roughly the same level of cases. It seems like the group that's submitting the charges is changed. So we're going to continue to monitor that, but it is something that we've talked about and done a little bit of research on. But we're still pretty new to that relationship with the University of Oregon, and so we're going to continue to monitor that.
So if following that up, are there any other models in other universities, cities where there is a contractual relationship where those cases are quantified, and then there's some remittance back to the city from that particular university unit? Is there some best practices out there that we can grab onto?
That's what I'll be taking a look at as we kind of get a little bit more information about what this reporting relationship will look like in support of their police services.
Yeah, because they're no longer public safety. They got a police department over there. So, yeah, I would be interested in seeing what that looks like. And if there is a model out there that, would work for us in terms of alleviating some of the stress on our system, I would be, more than happy to, engage that dialogue with the university.
Thank you.
So I want you to note that we're 4 minutes past when we're supposed to start our next part of the agenda. I want to give Chris and George Poling a chance to speak, and then we'll move on.
Okay, I'll try to go quickly. I wanted to thank you, as everyone else has, for your work, but I wanted to emphasize the fact that the City Council has basically 3 employees who answer directly to us, the municipal court judge being one of them. And part of the challenge of having an employee that you don't get to spend a lot of direct supervision time with is it's very hard to be a good boss, a good supervisor, if you're not in direct contact with the person you're supervising. That means you not only provide a valuable function, but you actually provide an indispensable function in that you do provide that level of interaction that we can't have. And from that standpoint, it makes the job that you do very important that you do it well. And what my impression is from reading your report and listening to your presentation today is that you have served us, as well as the judge, as well as it could possibly be done. You've done a survey, you've had conversations, you've been very thoughtful and deliberate, and so what you bring to us today helps us enormously and paves the way for a much more productive and effective conversation next week when we talk with the judge. Because when he comes here to be evaluated by us, I, for one, am somebody who says, I haven't been in your court. I don't want to be in your court, but I haven't been in your court. I haven't watched you work. How can I be a good boss if I haven't been able to work with you that closely? And that is the job you've provided. You have been that critical element that allows us to have a much better understanding for how that works. And from the standpoint that I see, in those areas where the judge can have a direct impact, within the courtroom and those kinds of issues, it's exemplary. It works well. But there's also indirect areas, administration, where you don't always have complete control. Sometimes certain situations are beyond your control. And the ability to work with those becomes some of those challenging areas. And what you help me today is to understand the judge is aware of them, the judge knows what his limitations are, and that there are things that the judge wants to put in place that we can work with. That's incredibly valuable. And so from that standpoint, I want to thank you for how well you have helped me to be able to do a better job of being a supervisor to one of the 3 employees that reports to us. I don't want to be a bad boss. You've helped me to be a better one, and for that, I thank you enormously.
George Polling?
See if I can do it less time than Chris. Just a big thanks to John and Eric for your presentation, the in-depth presentation, as well as to the entire Judicial Evaluation Committee. I'm particularly impressed with the way the report covers and I don't really know if they're deficiencies, but I guess that's the best way to call it. The conversation, the report that the part of the report that covers the conversation that the committee had with Judge Allen in reference to those deficiencies and the presentation on the plans to address those. I think that's very important. So with that, I have one question. As for Alana, we do have a public hearing scheduled for the 17th.
Yes.
Just so people know ahead of time, what information is expected, or are we asking for, or what is the value of having that public hearing, the purpose of it?
The public hearing gives everybody an opportunity to come and comment on the judge's performance, to take a look at the evaluation that was done, if they have anything that they want to add or to make you all aware of as the supervisor of Judge Allen. They'll have an opportunity to do that.
I also think there may be folks in the community who have had those direct experiences and might be willing to come and share those with you, whatever they may be. And that can add to the information that you've received in the report and today.
I guess I would hope that people would come, and that they would come with in mind that we're trying to look for ways to improve service, not to find fault, but to improve service, because that will help us do all of us do a better job. So people, if they come with that kind of thought in mind, they could really contribute to us improving our system. Okay, thank you. I'm going to end this, and thank you all so much for coming. Very thorough. Appreciate it. All right. Next item up is the Eugene Springfield 2015 Consolidated Plan Update. Quick transition.
And they're so related to each other.
Do we need to accept that report?
Not
here?
So after the
I think the motion is not about that. It will be about keeping him on for another.
There was language about accepting.
There was in the AIS the
it's not here.
recommendation. Yeah, there was a recommendation to accept it.
But there wasn't a motion.
Why don't I just
Where's the
recommendation to accept the report?
So, hold on for just a second. Why don't we just go, City Manager, we're going to go ahead and do that. We're just going to put this in a...
Form of a motion.
It's just accepting the report.
I move that we accept the Judicial Evaluation Committee's report on Judge Allen for 2014.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Okay, ready to vote on that? All those in favor, please indicate. So that's 7 in favor and none in opposition. Thank you for that little bit of detail. All right, we're ready.
All right, I'll just turn it over to Stephanie.
My name is Stephanie Jennings. I'm the grants manager in community development at the city, and I'm here to talk with Mayor and Council about the Eugene Springfield Consolidated Plan. And so I have a presentation. Each of you have a copy for your reference, and I'm going to try to scoot through this so that we can have some time for discussion. It'll probably take about 15 minutes to go through the presentation, so we have a little bit of time for discussion. So really, in today's conversation, what I'm hoping to do is to provide you with an overview of the consolidated plan, to give a little bit of background on the CDBG and home programs, which are the primary sources of funding that we direct for use through the consolidated plan, to talk about our current consolidated plan, which is the 2010 consolidated plan, and then the steps for developing the 2015 consolidated plan. So just quickly going to what is the consolidated plan? So the consolidated plan, the name is designated by HUD. The purpose of it is to set goals and strategies for the use of CDBG and home funds over a 5-year period. Eugene and Springfield receive CDBG and home funds based on a formula allocation, and the amount of money that we receive each year is dependent upon congressional appropriations. So it can go up or down depending upon how much Congress appropriates to it. It's not a competitive process, but there are a number of steps that we have to go through in order to receive this money and show that we're using it appropriately. And so that's a little bit of the background that I'm going to give to you. Our current plan expires on June 30th, 2015. In order to receive our next installment of grant funds on time, we need to submit our consolidated plan by May 15th. And that really means that it'll need to get in front of you by April for consideration. The goals in the plan must align with the eligible uses of CDBG and home funds, so that does create some markers and some boundaries around kind of what is in this plan or what isn't in this plan. So really, the purpose of the consolidated plan, it has a number of different purposes. Its first purpose is, you're supposed to look really broad, think about assessing housing and community needs, and looking at low-income people and neighborhoods through data analysis, community involvement, and agency consultation. The next step is to develop goals, objectives, strategies, and metrics for investing the CDBG and home funds that you expect that you'll receive over the next 5 years in the areas of greatest demonstrated need. HUD also asks us to coordinate with other plans and resources to create partnerships and try to leverage investments. And then also, as part of this, we're asked to consider how governmental policies affect availability and affordability of housing opportunities and impact low-income neighborhoods. There's a related plan called the Fair Housing Plan that we also do at the same time as the Consolidated Plan that takes a number of those issues into consideration. The next slide really shows the kind of overall planning framework. We do the consolidated plan once every 5 years. That gets adopted by council. Because it's the Eugene Springfield plan, it also gets adopted by Springfield City Council. And then each year we do an action plan, which is based on the specific allocation appropriation of funds that we receive. And that's when we come back to council and ask you to say, okay, we're going to put this amount of money in this bucket and this amount of money in that bucket for the uses. And then we go to implementation and reporting. So there's project selection and implementation. And then also each year we do a CAPER, which is the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report that has to be submitted to HUD to show what we're doing and how we're using the money. So just a little bit of background on the CDBG and home program, because I think it's helpful in thinking about what you can actually do with this money. CDBG was created 1970s, and the focus of it was really on supporting viable urban communities through three goals: affordable housing, expanded economic opportunity, and creation of suitable living environments. All of the uses of CDBG funds must meet one of these three national objectives. The first, benefit to low-income persons or neighborhoods, and actually 90% of the CDBG funds must meet the first objective. The other two objectives are prevent or eliminate slums and blight, that's the HUD term, and then the third is meet urgent needs in the case of disaster. CDBG funds are also restricted to certain eligible uses. Like, for example, you can't actually use it for new construction of affordable housing, except in some very special circumstances. Eugene is one of 16 jurisdictions in Oregon that receives a direct allocation of CDBG funds. For all of the smaller towns and rural areas, the state actually receives an allocation of CDBG funds for the balance of state. This is a pretty complicated program. There are a very large number of federal regulations that we are required to follow in the course of using this money. We also have some fairly strict expenditure deadlines. So we're constantly trying to figure out, how do we allocate the money, how do we get it assigned to projects, how do we make sure that we use it in a timely way so that we don't lose this money or lose access to this money. Up to 15% of CDBG funds can be used for human services, and so there is a limitation on the amount that can be directed for that particular use. It's best suited for affordable housing, economic development, human service operations, and capital facilities, and improvements to low-income areas. Funds can be used for capital projects that create emergency, transitional, or permanent affordable housing that meet habitability standards. And CDBG does not have a match requirement, but it has really tremendous potential to leverage other resources, and we have used it in this way in a number of programs. In contrast, the one and only purpose of the home program is to create affordable housing, and to that end, it is really focused on creating permanent affordable housing. So Eugene is an entitlement jurisdiction for home funds, and which means we're large enough to receive a direct allocation for home funds. Back in the early 90s, Eugene and Springfield formed a consortium so that we could create a pool of resources to also be able to support projects in Springfield. If CDBG is a complicated program, home is a tremendously complicated program, and it has just gotten far more complicated with the adoption of a number of new rules by HUD. And so really it's best suited for supporting new construction or acquisition of existing affordable housing. It can only be used to support permanent or long-term transitional housing because of the lease requirements. It does require a minimum 25% match of non-federal funds, and these funds can't be committed until all other project sources are in place. Home projects also must meet a very high habitability standard, and typically has up to a 20-year period of affordability that we are also required to monitor as part of the program. The next slide is not so positive. This is our funding trend over the past 10 years for the CDBG and home programs. And so in the home program, and this number that you see is for the home consortium as a whole, we have experienced an almost 40% decline in the available resources over the past 10 years. As it relates to CDBG, it's a 27% decline. This decline comes at a time of increasing need and costs for the projects that we do. So I would say the actual impact is even greater than the percentage decline that you see on this slide. It also impacts, in addition to impacting the funds available for projects, it impacts our staffing. Because we do draw resources from these programs for our staff expenses, and so that is also a challenge. I know that Council has included advocating for stable funding for CDBG and Home Fund as part of the United Front, and so I would just encourage us to consider that in the future as well. So I'm going to go over the 2010 Consolidated Plan goals and outcomes. I want you to keep the previous slide in mind when we're looking over the goals and outcomes, because when we developed this plan, we developed it based on the level of funding that we were receiving in 2009. As we go through the strategic plans, so the Consolidated Plan includes two strategic plans. One is the Affordable Housing Strategic Plan, and then the other is the Community Development Strategic Plan. As you can see with the projected outcomes and estimated outcomes, really this is what we expect to be able to achieve by the end of this fiscal year that we're currently in. You can see that we have not been able to meet our goals. And I would say funding is a key piece of this. I would say there certainly have been other challenges with the programs, but I would definitely point to the decrease in funding over time as a critical challenge for achieving the goals that we had set forth in the 2010 plan. Looking at a couple of the activities that I'd just like to point out, each year we do an affordable housing RFP, which is the primary mechanism for generating projects to increase the supply of affordable housing. The second goal, rehabilitating existing housing, we achieve through a revolving loan fund for housing rehabilitation, and then emergency home repair grants and loans that we do each year. The third item is to acquire land bank sites. At this point in time, we have not yet acquired any land bank sites in this period, but we're hopeful that we still will be able to make progress towards this goal by the end of this fiscal year. The bullets related to, or the sections related to creating homeownership opportunities and rental assistance, I would say that both of these programs were, the first was phased out because of the loss in funds, and we actually made a conscious choice. I would also say the further changes to the home program have made it even less feasible to do home buyer assistance through the home program, although we are currently considering how CDBG funds might be used to support down payment assistance. The rental assistance we had included as a goal, and with the potential to pilot this program, but because of the loss of funding, we just never decided that there was enough resource to start up a new program when we were not meeting the goals in our core programs. And then lastly, remove barriers to affordable and supportive housing. We have a goal, among others, to maintain the Housing Policy Board as a forum and a body for discussing issues of housing policy, and that is something that we have been able to do. These are examples of a number of the projects that we have been able to achieve over the past 5 years. In almost all of these cases, we are combining CDBG and home funds. We're also using city resources like system development charge waivers and the low-income rental housing property tax exemption. In most of these cases also, we are leveraging resources at almost 9-to-1. And so there are significant state and private investments that occur, but what is the most challenging for these projects is to find the grant and kind of gap resources. And typically what we've been able to do is by providing that allocation and early commitment of funds, it has given developers the ability to go out and get the state resources and get the private resources to make these projects happen. moving on to the Community Development Strategic Plan. So this plan is supported with CDBG only, and it covers a pretty broad range of activities. The first is support human service operations and capital improvements. We support operations through the Human Services Commission. We do annual or every other year RFPs for nonprofit capital facility improvements, where we work with them directly to make improvements to those facilities. The second area is providing business loans to create jobs, which is achieved through our Business Development Fund revolving fund. And then microenterprises is also a goal. Increasing accessibility to public facilities. We have used CDBG funds to support curb ramps and also accessible pedestrian devices in the past. And then lastly is making strategic improvements to low-income neighborhoods. And so an example of a project that falls into this category is the Blair Streetscape Improvement Projects, which was the sidewalks and the crossings. Another will be the renovation of Turner Mulligan Park. Here are just some examples of projects that have been supported with CDBG funds. So going on to next steps for the 2015 Consolidated Plan. And at this moment, I also wanted to just take a moment to recognize Carter Hawley, who is actually going to be doing a career development position with community development to help us with the development of the 2015 Consolidated Plan. So I'm very happy to have Carter as part of the team to do this work. And this is, I would say, a highly simplified version of what we have to go through for HUD that meets their requirements and I think creates a process that we can all understand and move through in a fairly logical fashion. There are really two stages in the process: evaluation and needs assessment, and then your strategic plan development. I tend to think of this as a series of concentric circles. You have the need in the community, you have what is eligible for using these funds for, and then you want to sort of get further in terms of what's feasible, because there are things that are eligible but really aren't very easy to implement using these resources. And then you get to the pot of resources that you actually have available to you and what you want to and think you can achieve over a 5-year period of time. As we go through this process, HUD strongly encourages us to do community involvement at both the needs stage and also at the prioritization stage. And so this just provides a little bit of detail that I'm not going to go into talk about too much right now. But what I will say is that this is a very low budget planning process, as in we receive no additional funding from HUD to do the planning. And so we are very creative in how can we leverage other pieces of work that have been done for other plans. For this planning process, the work that was completed through the Lane Livability Consortium on a number of different areas is going to be tremendously beneficial to us and help us get further along in this process much more quickly. Agency consultation and plan coordination is also another piece of this process, and so really, we will be looking at who are the other agencies that we should be talking to, what are the other plans that have goals that are related to the goals in this plan and that we can decide that we want to further. And again, we will also be fairly creative in how we can reach the sort of broad spectrum of interests that relate to this plan. So this just provides a little bit more detail on the different steps. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it just because of the time that we have. But really, these are some guiding questions that we'll be going through. These are some of the areas that HUD asks us to look at as part of the planning process. And setting the priorities and determining feasibility. think an important piece of this too is that there are some resources that CDBG and Home can be used for, but the city might have other resources that are a better match for that particular need that's identified. And so those are some questions we will be considering as part of this process. And then you're getting down to your specific objectives, strategies, and metrics. And this is HUD is asking us to be a little bit more precise than what we have been in the past. In the past, the CON plan has kind of been an umbrella. If you think you might do something, you kind of create a goal. What they're actually asking us to do in this process is to commit and prioritize, which is a little bit difficult to do when you don't know how much money you're going to get from year to year. We'll do the best we can. And this is the timeline for development. We have talked about coming back to council in kind of the January, February timeframe so that you have more information. You can kind of comment on the progress and the draft goals. And then again, we would come back at the time of adoption in April. So really 5 big ideas that I'm thinking about so far, and I'm interested to hear your feedback and thoughts as we go through this process. Part of this is how do we create greater focus for the use of funds given the declining resources and the increasing regulatory complexity? How can we find ways to leverage these resources? And we do that to a very significant extent in some areas, but not so much in others. How can we create partnerships towards a shared commitment towards this goal? So really, this is kind of in the past. This has been the city's goal, or set of goals. Do we want to try to get more players to commit to this set of goals over the 5-year period? We've also been talking about using an assets and financial stability framework, and there's a lot of work that's happening nationally at the state level and also regionally around how can we really not just focus on the tip of the iceberg, but the piece that's underneath, which is the underlying financial stability in our community, with the combination of expanding economic opportunity, affordable housing, and human services. There are a number of interesting pieces that come together in this particular planning process that fit well with that framework. And then lastly, how can we work with other partners, both locally and at the state level, to get to an increased level of affordable housing production, really recognizing that we are not meeting our traditional goal in that area. I'm going to stop there.
Very much. I've got Chris and George Poling and Betty in the queue, and Claire, and we'll all dash along here. I'll just toss something out that I don't have to answer for now, but maybe as part of your thinking. One is there anything in this for us to look at some of the housing that's becoming available because of the growth of new student housing, of repurposing some of the older housing stock that seems to be sitting there unused? There seems to be some interest in neighborhoods for doing that, and that could meet some of our Envision Eugene goals and all of that. So, and the other part is, and I'm sure Chris will have more to say about that, is this whole notion of micro housing, different kinds of housing. And I'll turn to Chris to pick up on that.
Yeah, that's definitely a part of the conversation, the different variety of housing that we can have in our portfolio. I just wanted to reinforce the need to get this consolidated plan done and get it done as quickly as possible. It's the foundational resource that's used by the Housing Policy Board. We couldn't do our work without the consolidated plan, so we need to get it done quickly. And I would also say that with declining resources, we need to work a lot smarter and more focused, and this plan allows us to do that. And while I was in the human services world, both at Red Cross and at United Way, I used the needs assessment information in this consolidated plan all the time to apply for grants. So there is money that can flow into our community based on what the conclusions are and the information in this plan. So it's not just used by the city, it's actually used by human service agencies all over. And so it's one of those PDFs I keep on my computer all the time because I'm referring to it. So That's just to let the rest of the council knows that as this work comes forward, we need to move on it quickly, and whatever Stephanie needs from us or from our groups to help get her done with this, we need to make sure that it happens in time to get it renewed. So it's really an important document, and she's done a great job of doing the one up until now, and so I'm looking forward to the next one.
George Pulling?
Thank you. Just some real quick questions. And I know that the use of these funds is pretty restricted, and we can't just willy-nilly throw it out to any project. And I know that occasionally council gets a report back on how these funds are used. Is there one specific person or a committee of staff members that makes sure that all the reporting is accurately done on a timely manner back to the federal government?
Yeah.
That would be you. So you have pretty good handle on making sure that not only are we applying for these grants and funds properly, but they're being used and reported back properly.
Yeah, that's the role traditionally of the grants manager within the city is with this funding.
And then my next question is, realizing that this home consortium was formed in 1992, and I'm all for consolidation. My question is it reviewed periodically, because both cities are changing demographically and population and everything else? Has it been reviewed to make sure that it is still the wisest way to go by keeping this this union together?
I mean, I would say there's actually some conversations underway and a review right now. Springfield has had some changes in staffing and also because of the declining resources and the new home rules. We are considering different options and really are kind of at an initial stage right now, but we'll certainly have more to talk about with council when we return in January, February on that topic.
Very good. And then in the CDBG presentation, as well as the home funds, the word habitability standards and high habitability standards were used. What exactly are those, and how do they apply?
So each program has different habitability standards, and so for the home program, we are just still kind of getting acquainted with the new requirements. But essentially, as we look at it, it is almost like new. And so, you know, if we're doing a rehabilitation project, the end product needs to meet a very detailed checklist, and it does include, you know, that you have to have kitchen and bath within the unit. And because really the purpose of the home is, the home program is permanent and long-term affordable housing. You can use home in group housing projects, and so we did, or single room occupancy, like Roosevelt Crossing and Bothy Cottage were both recipients of home funds. But there are some specific requirements as to whether or not those bath and kitchen facilities are located in the same building. So you don't have to go outside to reach those facilities. So, and then I think CDBG is more flexible, but there is still something called housing quality standards, and there are also some definitions of what must be included in a unit, but it is less restrictive than home.
So they're almost like a federal building code that we have to follow in order to get these grant and fund monies.
It only applies to the projects that are receiving these
Right.
resources. It has no policy impact on the rest of the city, but yes.
Okay. And then the last one is, in looking at that one chart, it seems like that the decline in the funds has drastically increased about 2010-ish. Is there any reason for that? It's nothing on our part, that's correct. It's all because the money is coming from the federal government, and that money's been gone elsewhere. Is that it?
Yeah, I mean, no matter, I mean, we can, by not doing a good job, we could lose access to our entitlement allocation, but by doing a great job, it doesn't mean that we're going to get access to more money. And so this is all controlled at a federal appropriations level.
Thank you.
Betty?
Thank you. CBDG is much more flexible, right? I've heard of communities using it for all sorts of things. And we could use those funds for single occupancy, right?
For single-room
Occupancy
occupancy
housing.
units, you can use CDBG for land acquisition and infrastructure and rehabilitation. You can't use it for new construction. You can use home for new construction of SRO units.
Well, it seems to me the thing that we have the most urgent need for is single-room occupancy. And that goes along with the transitional nature, which you were talking about somewhat. And it seems to me you mentioned transitional in the same sentence, I think, as you mentioned long-term.
Mm-hmm.
And it disturbs me that we don't pay more attention to transitional aspects of any subsidized housing. Is there any follow-up? I know to get into subsidized housing, you have to be below a certain income level, and I think children are required. Is that true?
I'm sorry?
Do they have to have children? No. But the income level. And if people then get better jobs, have a better income, does anyone check up to see if they're still using subsidized housing?
So I think the first question about use of these funds for transitional housing, there's a really wide variety of projects that have been completed in the community and using these resources. And some of it is permanent and some of it is transitional. And certainly with the CDBG funds, emergency housing, like Looking Glass or St. Vincent, shelter care facilities, those have received CDBG funds to support emergency housing. As it relates to the occupancy, it depends upon the program. CDBG requires that you do initial income certifications, and then after that, it's not required. For home, the income eligibility, they're required to check it every year. If it is a tax credit project, people living in tax credit developments, their incomes may rise and they are not required to leave. In home projects, generally the rents would go up. So there are some different policy requirements depending upon the use of funds and the sources of funds you're using in a particular project.
But if it's going to be transitional, and if it's subsidized, I think it should be transitional.
It
Then
is.
It seems
It is.
that there should be some checkup, and if you can afford to move to market-based housing, then you should do that and leave this subsidized housing for people who can't afford the other.
In the transitional developments, typically they're time limited, and so it might be 3 months or 6 months, and then they will have to leave. And so that is the definition of transitional housing.
Well, I think we pay more attention to that, but is there anything we can do as a council to direct that we use some of these funds for single-room occupancy?
So I would say that we do an annual RFP. We can certainly prioritize single room occupancy. Part of what we also have to do, though, is work with providers in the community, because they are really the ones who have to figure out how to assemble usually a dozen or more sources of funds in order to bring a project together. And so we can direct that. At the same time, we're also trying to make sure that we actually have projects that can move forward so that we can meet our home and CDBG commitment and expenditure deadlines. So there's always sort of this game that you play with how narrow do you make the box, that projects can come through and you can roll the dice and issue an RFP and not get any responses if you make it too sort of precise and specific. So what we have done, like for example, in the last RFP, and Councilor Pryor can speak to this, we asked for projects that were acquisition of existing affordable housing. They could be used for permanent or transitional, The application that we received from NEDCO is focused on youth without parental supports. It's not transitional, but it is addressing a special needs population in the community. And so that's a little bit of sort of some of the choices that we make in that process. And staff works with Housing Policy Board to generally make some decisions about how to focus the RFP processes.
Well, I'm thinking of what we need to do for all these people who are putting up their tents in the parks, frequently single people who don't have enough money to rent a place. And if there were places where you could go rent a room, maybe they could do it. And I think if there's any way that we can facilitate that opportunity, we should do so. Thank you.
So we're right up against the time.
I'll be brief. Just to Councilor Taylor's comment about affordable housing and folks moving out into retail housing, I've heard from affordable housing.